You've found nightfall murmurs. When day fades into silence, the world begins to whisper. Some stories come as murmurs, some as warnings, but they all come at night. Don't be afraid to listen, but never listen alone. The rhythm thrummed, a physical entity vibrating deep within my bones, yet it failed utterly to quell the frantic flutter against my ribs. Adrift. I was utterly adrift in a churning human tide, faces dissolving into smears of phosphorescent paint and shimmering dust under the strobing lights. How had they vanished, my anchors, in the space of a breath? This was Ethelgard, my inaugural pilgrimage. 3 days of sonic immersion, swallowing acres of land whole. My friends, Lena and Ben, had woven tales of transcendence for months, relentless weavers of hype, until I'd finally yielded. "Ilara, you have to," they'd urged, eyes wide with evangelical fervor. "It's transformative." Transformation wasn't quite the word I'd choose now. A fleeting quest for water, a mere moment's detachment, was all it took. The collective surged, a single organism drawn towards the magnetic pulse of the main stage. And just like that, Lena and Ben were absorbed, gone. My calls, thin threads of sound, frayed instantly against the sonic tempest and the crowd's communal roar. As dusk began to bleed across the sky, painting the festival grounds in strokes of bruised violet and dying orange, a knot of pure dread tightened low in my belly. The exhilarating ocean of bodies now felt suffocating, its waves threatening to pull me under. I navigated the dense throng, a litany of murmured apologies trailing in my wake as I jostled against slick skin and trod on unseen feet. Reaching the periphery of the main stage throng offered a wider vista, but no solace, only a sprawling labyrinth of canvas shelters, aromatic food vendors, and satellite stages pulsing with disparate beats. Pennants snapped like restless wings in the cooling air, heavy with the mingled scents of frying dough and something herbal, illicit. "Seem a little lost?" The voice, calm and grounded, materialized beside me. I pivoted. A man, perhaps early 30s, regarded me with a guileless gaze, his smile disarming. The official festival staff insignia, emblazoned on his shirt, acted as an immediate balm to my frayed nerves. "Completely," I confessed, a wave of fragile relief washing through me. "My friends, we were separated. The crowd just..." He offered a sympathetic nod. "Happens constantly here. I'm Silas, security detail." "Ilara!" His offered hand felt solid, reassuring. "Is there any way you could help me locate them?" "Absolutely," Silas affirmed, his smile broadening. "It's literally my job. Let's check the designated Lost and Found hub. People often pin notes there trying to reconnect." Grateful for the lifeline, I fell into step beside him. Silas moved through the swirling chaos with an easy confidence, parting the human sea effortlessly. As we traversed the grounds, he inquired about my missing companions, names, attire, last known coordinates. I relayed the details as best I could, my words often swallowed by the relentless sound systems flanking our path. We slipped past stalls, hawking exorbitant slices of pizza and greasy gyros, drifted by luminous art installations that breathed with alien light, skirted enclaves of dancers lost in private ecstasies. Under different stars, perhaps this spectacle would have felt enchanted. Now it was merely overwhelming, a beautiful monster. Just over this way, Silas indicated, gesturing towards a large, unassuming marquee bearing a faded, lost and found sign. Yet as we drew nearer, a dissonance registered. The tent slumped in shadow, utterly devoid of light or personnel. Is this definitely the place? My steps faltered. Silas's fingers clamped around my wrist, the pressure sudden, startling. Trust me, he murmured, the earlier warmth leaching from his tone, replaced by something flat and cold. I know precisely where we're headed. Alarm, sharp and piercing, shrieked through my system. I attempted to recoil, but his grip was a vice. Let go of me! The demand emerged thin, trembling. He paid no heed, towing me inexorably towards the darkened canvas. My boots skidded uselessly on the damp earth. I inhaled, readying a scream, but his other hand slammed over my mouth, stifling the sound. Shh, he breathed, his voice a venomous whisper near my ear. No need for theatrics, is there? My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. Nearby silhouettes swayed and laughed, blissfully unaware of the silent struggle unfolding mere paces away. How could they not see? He dragged me inside the tent's oppressive gloom. The festival's roar instantly muted to a dull throb. My vision swam, slowly resolving shapes in the near black. Stacked crates, a skeletal table, vacant chairs. What do you want? My voice was a ragged thread. Silas chuckled, a sound devoid of mirth, metallic and chilling. Oh, Ilara, such a trusting little thing. Pretty girl, wandering all alone in a place like this. Count yourself fortunate I spotted you first. The insinuation landed like ice against my skin. Escape. Now. I brought my heel down, hard, onto his instep, pouring every ounce of my weight into the blow. He gasped, a sharp intake of pain, his grip momentarily faltering. It was enough. I wrenched my arm free, spun, and my palm connected with his cheek in a wild, uncoordinated slap fueled by pure terror. Silas stumbled, less injured than stunned. I didn't linger. I launched myself towards the tent flap, propelled by adrenaline, my throat raw with unvoiced screams. Bursting back into the relative light, I collided squarely with another figure. Strong hands grasped my shoulders, anchoring me. A fresh wave of fear surged. An accomplice? Until my gaze locked onto the official security vest. The crackling radio clipped to a shoulder strap. The stern, questioning brow. Whoa, easy there, the uniformed guard said, his voice firm. Everything okay? A torrent of fractured words spilled out. Help me, please. That man, inside. He said security, but he's not. He tried to... My frantic explanation was cut short as Silas emerged from the tent. His expression was a mask of composure, though fury glittered deep in his eyes. There you are, he said, his voice unnervingly smooth. Got worried when you bolted like that. The real guard's gaze shifted between us, confusion clouding his features. What's the situation here? Silas stepped forward, projecting an aura of calm concern. Terribly sorry about this, officer. My girlfriend here indulged a little too much. Just trying to get her some water. Let her sit down for a bit. Disbelief rendered me momentarily speechless. "He's lying! I don't know him!" The guard's hand moved towards his radio. "Sir, I'm going to need to see some identification." Silas's facade dissolved instantly. He shoved the guard, a brutal, unexpected force that sent the man staggering. Then he pivoted and plunged back into the dense crowd. "Stop him!" I shrieked, but he was already dissolving into the anonymous mass, swallowed by the night. The ensuing hours became a disorienting montage. More security personnel materialized, followed by uniformed police. I recounted the sequence of events again and again, describing Silas, the tent, the lie. They swept the grounds, methodical but ultimately fruitless. He had vanished. As the adrenaline ebbed, profound exhaustion washed over me. I sat huddled in a coarse emergency blanket, clutching a paper cup of tepid coffee, the festival's distant pulse, a surreal counterpoint to the violation I'd narrowly escaped. "Ilara!" A familiar cry sliced through the haze. I looked up. Lena and Ben were shouldering their way towards me, their faces canvases of frantic worry. "Oh my God, Ilara! We've been searching everywhere!" Their arms enveloped me, a sudden fierce haven, and the dam finally broke. Sobs racked my body, a messy outpouring of terror, relief, and residual adrenaline soaking into their familiar shoulders. Later, cocooned within the relative safety of our tent, I narrated the ordeal. They listened, aghast, punctuating the story with tight hugs and reassurances that none of this was my fault. "I can't believe we lost you," Lena murmured, her voice thick with self-reproach. I shook my head, numb. "It wasn't your fault. I'm so glad you're here." Sleep was a fugitive that night. Every rustle of canvas, every distant shout sent jolts of fear through me. Shadows seemed to coalesce into Silas's face, yet anchored by the physical presence of my friends, a fragile sense of security began to tentatively unfurl. Dawn painted the eastern sky in tender shades of rose and gold as the festival's final day stirred to life. A decision crystallized within me, quiet but resolute. I wouldn't permit this violation to eclipse everything else. Silas had attempted to steal something vital, my trust, my feeling of safety, but I refused to grant him that victory. We emerged from the tent, blinking against the sudden brilliance. The festival grounds were reawakening. Early birds flowed through yoga poses on the dew-kissed grass. The aroma of coffee and sizzling bacon drifted from the vendor stalls. Lena and Ben watched me, their expressions uncertain. "Are you sure you want to stay, Ilara?" Ben asked gently. "We can pack up, head home right now." I drew a deep breath, surveying the sprawling scene. In the clarifying light of day, it felt different. Not the menacing entity of my fear-fueled imagination, but a space dedicated to sound, connection, shared joy. "I'm sure," I heard myself say, surprised by the unexpected firmness in my own voice. "But promise me something." "Anything," they replied in unison. A small, hesitant smile touched my lips. "From now on, stick close, really close." As we moved towards the main stage, the opening chords of the day's first act rising to meet us, a palpable weight seemed to lift from my shoulders. What transpired with Silas would remain etched within me, a harsh lesson learned, but it wouldn't be the entirety of my story. I was more than the precipice I'd been dragged to. I was a survivor. I was Lena and Ben's friend. I was here for the music, and in that moment, surrounded by the people I trusted, ready to embrace whatever came next, I was precisely where I needed to be. The festival played on, vibrant and insistent, and so would I. His eyes found mine in the rearview mirror's small rectangle, and instantly, the vast, indifferent expanse of the highway became a cage. Not the gaze of a rescuer, no. This was the sharp, assessing look of a hunter pinpointing its quarry. And I, Ilara, was ensnared on this desolate ribbon of asphalt, civilization a distant memory. It began with the allure of elsewhere, a coast-to-coast pilgrimage toward a nascent future. My battered sedan, crammed with the sum total of my worldly possessions, hummed a tune of liberation. Open road, fresh canvas, an odyssey unfolding, until, somewhere deep in the oceanic wheat fields of Kansas, the car developed a voice, a worrisome rattle from its metallic guts. Hours had dissolved under the immense, vacant dome of the sky. The sun bled across the horizon, a spectacular hemorrhage of orange and violet, just as the first tremor started. A subtle vibration at first, almost lost beneath the engine's drone and the radio's static comfort. But mile after relentless mile, it escalated, a frantic percussion demanding attention. Denial was my first refuge. The schedule was unforgiving, the specter of delay a knot in my stomach. Yet when vaporous white tendrils began escaping the hood's seams, denial evaporated. A muttered curse escaped my lips as I guided the ailing vehicle onto the gravel shoulder. The rattle had crescendoed into a violent clatter before the engine choked, sputtered, and fell silent. Perfect, just utterly perfect. Emerging, I lifted the hood, batting away the caustic smoke. My mechanical knowledge was rudimentary, but the sight confirmed my fears. A chaotic tangle of hoses and steel, inscrutable and broken, profoundly out of my element. My hand instinctively sought my phone. Predictably, no bars illuminated the screen. The sun had fully submerged now, twilight rapidly thickening into an inkier gloom. The highway, moments ago, a symbol of freedom, now pulsed with a latent menace. An involuntary shiver traced my spine despite the evening's lingering warmth. Then, twin beams sliced through the deepening dark. A surge of adrenaline, this time laced with hope. Waving frantically, I watched an old, hulking pickup truck decelerate, its engine rumbling, pulling in behind my stranded car. Relief washed over me. A man emerged, tall, built like a bulwark against the prairie wind. The dimness obscured details, but I registered a dense beard, the frayed bill of a baseball cap pulled low. He ambled closer, an easy grin splitting his face. "Bit of trouble?" His voice was a low, gravelly resonance. I nodded, a helpless gesture towards the still smoking engine. "Just gave up on me. Happen to know your way around one of these?" A low chuckle. "Might know a thing or two. Mind if I have a look-see?" Stepping back, I observed as he bent over the engine bay, his large hands probing the mechanical innards, accompanied by indistinct murmurs. After a few tense minutes, he straightened, wiping grease onto worn denim. "Well," he pronounced, "ain't catastrophic. That's the upside. Downside is, you need a part I haven't got. Nearest town with a decent garage is maybe 30 miles on. Happy to give you a lift, if you're willing." Hesitation coiled within me. Every primal warning system shrieked against accepting a ride from a stranger on this godforsaken road. Yet the alternative? Marooned here until dawn, or longer. When might another vehicle even appear? "That would be incredible. Thank you," I managed, injecting a false confidence into my tone. "I truly appreciate it." His smile returned, but something in its configuration sent a prickle across my skin. "Glad to be of service. Grab your essentials. Hop on in." Snatching my purse and phone, I locked the car, a futile gesture of habit in this void. He was already behind the wheel, the truck idling patiently. I settled into the passenger seat, the ancient springs groaning beneath me. "Name's Silas," he offered, easing the truck back onto the blacktop. "Ilara," I returned, clicking the seatbelt home. "Thanks again, really. I was starting to think I'd be out here all night." Silas nodded, gaze fixed forward. "Can be risky out here. Young woman like you, all alone. Never know who you might cross paths with." A nuance in his delivery made me glance sharply his way. His profile was etched in shadow, save for the faint curl at the edge of his lips. Not a kind smile. A heavy silence descended, amplifying the rumble of tires on asphalt and the frantic drumming of my own heart. I yearned for the radio's banal chatter, any sound to dilute the thickening tension. "So," I ventured, desperate to puncture the quiet, "are you from around here?" He shook his head slowly. "Nope, just passing through. Same as you." "Oh, where are you headed?" He turned his head fully towards me then. In the eerie green luminescence of the dashboard, his eyes seemed to gleam with a dark, predatory light. "Wherever the road decides to take me." A glacial chill snaked down my spine. I averted my gaze, feigning interest in the impenetrable darkness outside the window. No lights, no structures, just an endless void. We might as well have been the last two souls on Earth. It was then I saw it, a detail so jarring it turned my blood to ice. We'd been driving a solid 20 minutes, maybe more, but the odometer hadn't clicked over a single tenth of a mile. Immobilized digits stared back at me. We weren't heading towards any town. We were adrift, directionless or worse. Silas," I began, my voice betraying a tremor. "I think maybe we missed an exit? Shouldn't we be getting close to that town by now?" No reply. He simply drove on, that small, disquieting smile fixed in place. "Silas," I repeated, louder, firmer. "Did you hear me? We need to turn around." With startling speed, his hand shot out, slamming down the door lock. The metallic thunk echoed like a death knell in the confined space. "Now, Ilara," he purred, his voice dropping to a low, menacing register. "Why would I want to do a thing like that? We're just starting to get acquainted." Panic detonated within my chest. A waking nightmare, the cautionary fable made real. This wasn't supposed to happen, not to me. Yet it was, undeniably, terrifyingly unfolding. Act now, or never see daylight again. My eyes darted around the cab, seeking a weapon, any advantage. My purse lay at my feet. Inside, nestled amongst the usual clutter, was the pepper spray my mother had insisted upon. If I could just reach it undetected. "You know," Silas continued, his tone unnervingly conversational, like old friends reminiscing. "Been driving this stretch for years. Surprising how many pretty little things find themselves stranded. Always so thankful, so trusting." I forced a veneer of calm, needing him occupied while my fingers crept downwards, inch by agonizing inch. "And what happened to them?" The question felt like swallowing glass, but I needed the distraction. He laughed, a hollow, chilling sound that vibrated through the seat. "Oh, they're still out here. Pieces of 'em anyway, scattered through these fields, feeding the wheat that feeds the world. Kind of poetic, wouldn't you say?" My fingers finally closed around the familiar cool cylinder of the spray. I inhaled sharply, gathering my resolve. "You know what I think?" I asked, my voice tight. He turned, one eyebrow cocked inquisitively. "What's that, sweetheart?" In a single, fluid arc, I raised the canister and discharged its entire caustic payload directly into his face. Silas roared, a sound of pure agony and fury, wrenching the wheel. The truck bucked violently, careening off the pavement, jolting over the uneven earth before shuddering to a bone-jarring halt. No hesitation. I slammed the unlock button, flung the door open, and hurled myself out, landing hard on the unforgiving ground. Pain flared in my shoulder, but raw adrenaline surged, lifting me. I ran with a primal desperation I hadn't known I possessed, lungs searing, heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Behind me, I heard Silas bellowing threats, vile promises that chilled me to the marrow, but I didn't dare look back. I just ran into the suffocating darkness. Time lost meaning. It could have been minutes or an eternity. My legs burned, each breath a sharp stab. Fear was the fuel, propelling me beyond exhaustion's brink. Then, salvation flickered in the distance, the harsh fluorescent sanctuary of a gas station. A beacon. I stumbled towards it, relief crashing over me in dizzying waves at the sight of parked cars, lighted windows, the mundane, beautiful evidence of safety. I burst through the glass door, eliciting a startled look from the drowsy attendant. "Please," I gasped, words tumbling out between ragged breaths. "Call the police. A man, he tried to—" The sentence fractured. The adrenaline ebb tide revealed the crushing weight of what had nearly transpired, and I crumpled to the linoleum, shaking uncontrollably, tears finally breaking free. The subsequent hours were a fragmented haze. Officers arrived, their questions gentle but probing, my statement raw and disjointed. They located my abandoned car, arranged for its retrieval. Of Silas and his truck, there was no trace. Their expressions, carefully neutral, conveyed little optimism about finding him. As dawn painted the eastern sky in pale washes of light, I found myself in a small-town diner, cradling a mug of coffee long gone cold. Alive. I had endured, but the experience had irrevocably altered the landscape within me. The open road, once pregnant with promise, now felt laced with potential menace. Every unfamiliar face held a flicker of threat. The world had tilted, revealing its darker angles. Yet, amidst the fear, a new awareness stirred, a resilience unearthed. Confronted by absolute terror, I hadn't simply frozen. I had fought. I had survived. Watching the sun climb higher over the endless Kansas wheat, a silent vow took shape. Fear would not be my jailer. Caution, yes. Vigilance, certainly. But I refused to let one man's darkness extinguish my own capacity for adventure, my fundamental belief in the possibility of good. Later, my car, miraculously whole again, hummed beneath me. I eased it back onto the highway. The road stretched onward, an ribbon of uncertainty, holding both peril and potential. But I drove forward, changed, scarred, yet ready. Because sometimes, the journeys that break us are the ones that ultimately show us the unyielding strength coiled within our own spirit. I knew who I was now. A survivor. The hallway's ancestral clock disgorged midnight, its sepulchral tones vibrating through the vacant chambers of the house. I surfaced abruptly from sleep, pulse hammering against my ribs, grappling with the dissolving filaments of some unremembered dread. For a disoriented beat, location eluded me. Then awareness surged. The Ashworth's labyrinthine Victorian, this house-sitting contract, initially perceived as a gentle route to supplemental income. 3 days I'd resided within these walls, yet an intrinsic wrongness clung persistently to the air. Perhaps merely the arthritic groans of aged timber settling, or the wind's mournful flute through the eaves when storms raged. Yet moments existed when phantom footfalls echoed in deserted rooms, when peripheral flickers mimicked animate shapes. Dispelling the lingering sleep fog with a shake of my head, I swung my legs earthward. The bare hardwood sent a shock of cold through my feet as I traversed the guest suite toward the adjoining bath. Water, cold and sharp, splashed against my face, an attempt to exorcise the dream's unsettling residue. Reaching for linen, I froze. A muted concussion resonated from somewhere deeper within the house. Breath held captive. I strained my hearing against the profound quiet. An eternity stretched in silence. Then again, a muffled impact, suggestive of displaced weight. "Is anyone there?" My voice, a fragile thread in the cavernous quiet, elicited no reply. Solitude was the arrangement, or so I'd understood. I eased from the bathroom, gaze sweeping the gloom-drenched bedroom. Order reigned, yet the lunar shafts piercing the panes sculpted shadows deeper, somehow more predatory than moments before. Another thud, this one sharper, undeniably originating from the lower floor. My heart ascended, a frantic drum against my throat. "Police!" the thought screamed, but the accusation felt flimsy, noises in a notoriously creaky manse. Instead, a morbid magnetism drew me toward the bedroom door. The corridor beyond presented a wall of blackness, so dense it felt almost viscous. My phone materialized, its meager luminescence carving a hesitant path as I navigated toward the staircase. The grandfather clock persisted, each tick an agonizingly drawn-out second. Descending, the antique treads groaned under my weight. Each creak prompted a wince, a certainty that my presence was announced to whatever, or whoever, lurked below. The foyer, vast and dim at the stair base, swallowed my phone's beam. Leftward lay the drawing room. Rightward, the dining chamber. Ahead, the kitchen's unseen depths. From which direction had the disturbance sprung? A sigh of movement, soft as displaced dust, whispered from the drawing room, settling my trajectory. With my heart lodged firmly in my throat, I crept toward the archway, one hand questing along the wall for the switch. Contact. A flick. Light exploded, a painful glare after the Stygian dark, momentarily blinding me. I blinked fiercely, pupils contracting against the onslaught. When vision returned, a scream nearly escaped. Chaos reigned. Furniture lay overturned, a detritus of books and objets d'art scattered across the Persian rug, and poised amidst the wreckage stood absence. I blinked again, convinced of hallucination, or its inverse, because in that fractured instant before my sight cleared, I'd perceived a form. Tall, nebulous, more coagulation of shadow than solid matter. Now only the disarray occupied the space. "Hello?" I tried again, my voice betraying its tremor. "Is someone here?" Silence answered, absolute and crushing. Even the clock's steady rhythm failed to penetrate this vacuum. Tentatively, I advanced a step into the room. Shards crunched beneath my bare soul. A sharp hiss of pain escaped me. Looking down, I saw the fragmented ruin of a photograph frame. Within its jagged embrace lay the Ashworths, patriarch, matriarch, 2 children, beaming for the lens. But as I watched, the image seemed to liquefy, the smiles contorting into silent shrieks, the eyes darkening into vacant pits. I recoiled with a strangled yelp, the frame clattering away. A second glance revealed only the original, static photograph, the family's frozen joy undisturbed. Were remnants of the dream still clinging, weaving this waking nightmare? I rubbed furiously at my eyes. It was then I felt it, an icy exhalation upon the nape of my neck, raising goose flesh along my arms. I spun, finding nothing. Only the vacant archway, the unlit hall stretching beyond. "This isn't amusing," I addressed the void, forcing anger into my tone to mask the burgeoning terror. "If you're here, reveal yourself." As if summoned, a low moan uncoiled through the house, its origin indeterminate, seeming to emanate from the very walls. It was a sound of pure, distilled anguish, sending glacial tremors down my spine. Retreating, my foot snagged on an overturned occasional table. Balance deserted me. I fell backward, landing hard. The impact stole my breath, leaving me momentarily stunned, gasping on the floor. When air returned, I leveraged myself onto my elbows and froze. There, limned against the room's far edge, stood the figure, precisely as glimpsed before. More shadow than substance, its boundaries blurred, indistinct, yet undeniably humanoid. Head, shoulders, arms hanging limp. I scrambled backward, mouth agape in a voiceless scream. The entity remained motionless, seemingly oblivious, swaying faintly as if stirred by an imperceptible current. "What are you?" The question emerged choked, barely audible. Its head pivoted toward me, though no features resolved within the umbral countenance. For a protracted moment, we remained locked in a tableau, my raw fear confronting its... what? Sorrow? A profound longing? The emotion radiating from the spectral shape defied easy definition. Then, with the abruptness of a snuffed candle, it vanished. One instant present, the next simply not, leaving me utterly alone in the ravaged drawing room. I remained seated for an immeasurable duration, breath catching in short, ragged bursts, eyes darting, scanning the wreckage for any recurrence. Nothing. Only overturned chairs, scattered possessions, and the suffocating quietude. Gradually, on legs that trembled violently, I rose. Escape. Call someone. The Ashworths, the authorities, a cleric, anyone. Yet, turning toward the exit, motion snagged my attention. A book flung open amidst the floor-strewn literature. As I watched, its pages began to turn, accelerating, fluttering as if caught in a gale. But the room's air lay heavy, utterly still. Compelled by a curiosity that defied logic, I moved closer. The frantic flipping ceased as suddenly as it began, settling on a particular spread. I leaned in, squinting against the dimness. A local history, I discerned, and there, starkly circled in what appeared disturbingly like desiccated blood, was a passage concerning this very house, the Ashworth residence. It spoke, erected 1887 by Silas Ashworth, long subject of spectral rumor. Local lore recounts a devastating fire in 1902, which tragically consumed Ashworth's wife and 2 young offspring. Ashworth himself vanished soon after, his fate unknown. Some whisper he succumbed to grief. Others contend his spirit still traverses the halls, eternally seeking reunion with his lost kin. A profound chill permeated me as I absorbed the text. The photograph flashed in my mind, the smiles warping into screams. Could it be? Was this house truly? A faint stir behind me prompted another sharp turn. Hovering in the archway stood not one shadowy form, but 4, a tall one, presumably Silas Ashworth, flanked by 3 smaller figures, his wife, his children. They offered no movement, no sound. They simply existed, observing me with gazes devoid of eyes, yet heavy with the accumulated weight of decades steeped in loneliness and loss. "I'm sorry," I whispered, the apology encompassing a grief I hadn't known existed. I didn't understand. The figures seemed to incline their heads in unison, a gesture of acknowledgement, perhaps absolution. Then slowly they began to attenuate, their forms growing increasingly translucent until they dissolved entirely into the ambient air. The grandfather clock chimed once more. 1 o'clock. Had merely an hour elapsed. It felt an epoch. My legs surrendered. I sank to the floor. The house was silent now, but the quality of silence had transformed. No longer oppressive, but imbued with a tranquil stillness, as if a protracted, invisible tension had finally dissipated. How long I sat there, absorbing the night's revelations, I cannot say. When the first tentative fingers of dawn probed through the windows, I finally stirred, muscles stiff, body aching. Departure was logical. Contact the Ashworths. Explain what? Their property harbored ghosts? That I'd experienced a psychotic episode and vandalized their drawing room? Neither narrative held appeal. But as I gained my feet, something arrested me. A sensation, an intuition beyond articulation. This place, these spectral remnants, they harbored no malice. Only loss, profound solitude, a yearning for comprehension. My gaze swept the ruined chamber, and a decision coalesced. I would remain. I would restore order to this room, and I would delve deeper into the Ashworth family story. Perhaps improbably, I could facilitate the peace they had sought for more than a century. As my hands began to right the overturned furniture, a distinct warmth enveloped me, akin to a gentle, comforting embrace, and I understood, with a certainty that defied reason, that my choice was correct. This house, freighted with its secrets and sorrows, had somehow selected me. I would endeavor to honor that selection. The instant my fingers traced the outline of the concealed doorframe in the cellar's gloom, I sensed a tectonic shift in the landscape of my life. What I couldn't fathom was the plunge into a Stygian abyss that would claw at my sanity for years uncounted. My name is Eliza. I'd just poured my soul and savings into acquiring my first home, a skeletal Victorian jewel box on the town's frayed edge, promising restoration. It felt like anchoring after an eternity adrift in rented spaces. The seller's haste, practically gifting the keys, should have screamed caution. Such bargains rarely bloom without thorns. Barely a month had I nested within its walls, liberating belongings from cardboard confinement, coaxing life back into dormant rooms. The cellar remained the final, unconquered territory, a subterranean hoard of the previous occupants' detritus, veiled in dust and neglect. Procrastination had been my shield, but the day arrived to breach the chaos. Amidst strata of yellowed periodicals, my knuckles grazed something frigid, metallic, sequestered behind tottering box towers. Curiosity piqued, I wrestled the cardboard aside, revealing an ornate, miniature door handle. A tremor ran through me as I excavated further, unearthing a portal utterly missed before. Hewn from wood dark as ancient peat, its frame writhed with elaborate carvings, whispering of an age far preceding the house itself. The handle refused my turning, locked fast. A meticulous cellar sweep yielded no corresponding key. Frustration warred with burgeoning intrigue. Ascending to retrieve my tools, I felt a singular resolve harden within me. Whatever secrets lay beyond that threshold, they would yield. Persuasion proved arduous, but metal eventually groaned against metal, the lock surrendering with a reluctant click. The door swung inward on protesting hinges, exhaling a breath of profound darkness. The scent struck first, a composite of mildewed earth, stagnant damp, and an acrid undertone defying identification. My phone's beam sliced the blackness. What illuminated froze the marrow in my bones. The chamber was minuscule, perhaps 6 feet across. Its walls crawled with alien sigils and script, some strokes possessing the disturbing texture of dried blood. Centered stood a low table, burdened with relics seemingly curated from a nightmare. Brittle bones, murky jars cradling unnameable suspensions, and a substantial tome bound in distressed leather. Drawn by an almost gravitational pull, overriding the claxons of fear, I approached the table. The book beckoned. With a hand that betrayed my inner turmoil, I lifted the heavy cover. Its pages mirrored the wall's profane calligraphy, punctuated by illustrations of grotesque anatomies, savage ceremonies, visions that roiled my stomach. Yet it was the photographs that arrested me. Sepia-stained, antique, they chronicled human figures subjected to exquisite torture, limbs contorted, faces masks of agony. A jolt, electric and horrifying, shot through me as I recognized one backdrop. It was this house, undeniably, but decades gone. Dominating the foreground, A man with a rictus of cruel amusement presided over a woman lashed to a chair, her eyes wide with terror. I slammed the volume shut, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. This was violation, profanity, an urgency to flee, to alert authorities, to act, seized me. But as I pivoted, a sound from above turned my blood to ice, footsteps striking the floorboards overhead. Heavy, measured treads. Not mine. Immobilized by a primal terror, my thoughts scattered like startled birds. Had I forgotten the front door lock? Impossible, I was certain. Then how? The steps were now migrating, purposefully, towards the cellar stairs. My gaze darted, desperate for sanctuary in the suffocating confines, but the room offered none. In a spasm of instinct, I squeezed myself behind the now open hidden door, flattening against the cold stone. A pathetic concealment, yet my only recourse. The main cellar door groaned open. The footsteps began their slow, deliberate descent. Each tread echoed, weighted with an unnerving familiarity of its path. I held my breath, a silent plea forming. Don't find me. Please don't find me. Futile hope. The steps halted directly outside my meager refuge. A dreadful pause hung in the air, thick with anticipation, before a voice fractured the silence, deep, grating, steeped in malice. I know you're in there, it rasped. Your fear perfumes the air. An involuntary whimper escaped my lips. A low chuckle answered, a vibration that resonated deep in my bones. Come out, little mouse, it crooned, a grotesque parody of playfulness. Resistance only sharpens the appetite. My mind raced, seeking an escape route where none existed. Silence might feign absence, but the thought dissolved even as it formed. This presence, new. With legs like water, I edged out from behind the door. The figure awaiting me stole the air from my lungs. Tall, unnaturally so, draped in a long black coat that seemed to drink the light, leaving only deeper shadow. But the face was pure nightmare. Skin stretched taut and pale, almost luminous over sharp bones. Eyes like embers glowed with an infernal red light. A mouth stretched into a grin far too wide for any human visage, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. Ah, there you are, it purred, the sound slick with false welcome. I have anticipated an audience like you for quite some time. My mouth opened to scream, but only silence emerged. The creature, for no man moved or looked so, extended a long-fingered hand, tipped with claws like obsidian shards. Do not recoil, it cooed, its voice a dissonant melody. This will only inflict, well, rather a lot of pain, truthfully, but its duration will be fleeting. In that instant, raw survival instinct detonated within me. I ducked beneath the reaching arm, launching myself forward with the speed born of sheer terror. I devoured the basement stairs, 2, 3 at a time, its laughter a pursuing wave of sound. Bursting through the front door into the indifferent afternoon, I didn't pause, didn't look back until I reached my car. Hands trembling violently, I fumbled the key into the ignition. As tires screamed against the pavement, a glance in the rearview mirror captured it. Standing on the porch, that horrific rictus still splitting its face. It raised one hand in a slow, mocking farewell as I fled. I drove until the landscape blurred, until fear became a dull thrum beneath exhaustion. Only when dawn bruised the eastern horizon did I finally pull into a desolate rest stop, the engine shuddering into silence as my own tremors continued. What had I witnessed? What was that entity? And the gnawing question, what now? The police? What possible narrative could I construct? Officer, I found a satanic panic room in my basement and was chased out by a tall, toothy monster with glowing eyes. They'd measure me for a padded cell. Ultimately, anonymity beckoned. A sterile hotel room became my refuge, a place to attempt processing the unthinkable. But days bled into nights marked by phantoms, every creak, every shadow morphing into the creature from the cellar. Sleep offered no solace, only replays of the ghastly grin, the burning eyes. Weight melted from my frame. My reflection became a haunted stranger. After a week suspended in this purgatory of fear, a stark realization dawned. I couldn't live like this. I had to confront the source, unearth the truth festering within those walls. I returned on a bright Tuesday, the sun casting the house in deceptive normalcy, peaceful, almost benign. But the illusion shattered the moment I crossed the threshold. The silence within was watchful, pregnant. With leaden feet and a wildly beating heart, I descended once more into the cellar's chill embrace. The hidden door gaped open, framing the small chamber beyond. But it was void. No table, no book, no ghastly artifacts. Only bare stone walls and a film of undisturbed dust. For a fleeting, desperate moment, I clung to the hope of hallucination, a stress-induced fugue. Then my eyes fell upon it. A single sheet of paper lying starkly in the room's center. My hand shook as I retrieved it. Elegant, looping script conveyed a message that turned my veins to ice. The overture is complete. Our paths shall cross again, sooner than you think. I fled the house that day and never looked back. I sold it at a devastating loss, the money irrelevant against the need for distance. 5 years have elapsed. I've traversed the continent, assumed a new identity, woven layers of forgetting around the memory. Yet deep in the marrow, I know the cessation is illusory. Sometimes, drifting on the edge of sleep, I hear that gravelly voice, glimpse that impossible grin, and the certainty chills me. Someday, when vigilance sleeps, the game will resume. So, if you find yourself drawn to an old house's secrets, tempted to pry open that boarded-up alcove or forgotten crawl space, heed this. Some discoveries are best left entombed, because once you invite the darkness across the threshold, the door can never truly be sealed again. I hadn't conceived an old playhouse could leave one feeling so utterly unfurled. I recall it vividly. Standing center stage, the vast cavern of the house lights extinguished, save for a solitary ghost light casting long shadows behind me. Before me stretched rows of skeletal seats, motes of dust performing slow pirouettes in the stagnant air. My heart thrummed against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the certainty that unseen eyes were fixed upon me. That was my initiation into the derelict theater, a memory that still sends a shiver tracing my spine. Circumstance had led me there. Our fledgling production, desperate for a rehearsal space, had seized upon this forgotten venue, recommended by my friend Clara. My first visit was under the dubious clarity of daylight. Plywood scabbed over broken foyer windows, canvases for the spray-painted scrawls of passing vandals. Stepping across the threshold, I was assaulted by the cloying perfume of decay, ancient carpet, sodden wood, the unmistakable tang of mildew. A cough rattled in my chest. The air itself felt thick, heavy with years of neglect. Broken chairs lay like fallen soldiers. Promotional posters hung in tatters, and the ticket booth gaped, its glass fractured into a spiderweb mosaic. Elias, my director, and the others shared my apprehension. Their faces tight, but necessity gnawed at us. The rent was a pittance, and the stage beckoned. That same evening, Elias decreed I would hold solo sessions within its walls. Familiarity, he claimed, would breed comfort on stage. My first solitary arrival was an exercise in forced bravado. The antique key grated in the heavy lock. Pushing the door inward revealed the main artery, a corridor leading towards the auditorium's gaping maw. Each footstep resonated, echoing unnaturally in the quiet. A faint, acrid scent, like scorched insulation, pricked my nostrils. Above, the ceiling bore fissures, and the few remaining light bulbs either flickered erratically or surrendered entirely to darkness. It felt less like entering a building and more like trespassing on resented ground. I navigated directly to the auditorium. The stage loomed, immense, draped in thick crimson curtains, now muted to a dusty umber. A tentative brush against the fabric left my fingertips coated in fine gray powder. Near the stage lip, a single spotlight, tethered to a primitive electrical rig, waited. I flipped the switch. It hummed, sputtered, then grudgingly cast a weak, jaundiced beam. Just enough illumination to define my immediate space. The silence was profound, broken only by the rasp of my own breathing and the low thrum of the light. A clammy film slicked my skin. My stomach cinched tight, mimicking the prelude to some monumental, life-altering performance. To dispel the oppressive sensation of being observed, I began reciting lines from our play. My voice, however, seemed too large, bouncing back from the vacant seats with unnerving clarity. And the seats, they seemed to possess a vacant gaze. Dust lay thick as velvet, disturbed only by the clear imprint of my own path. I fought down the rising tide of unease. A few lines in, a sound pricked the silence, a faint susurrus, like whispering, emanating from the deeper rows. I froze mid-word. My mouth turned to parchment, my heartbeat echoing thunderously in my ears. Motionless, I strained to listen. The sibilance persisted for several heartbeats, then faded, punctuated by the faint scrape of metal on metal. The building settling, I told myself, forcing air into my lungs. I resumed my rehearsal, but then distinctly a voice, soft, ethereal, like exhaled breath, whispered the very line poised on my lips. Tears pricked my eyes. A cold tingle danced across the nape of my neck. Script clutched tight. I spun towards the engulfing darkness. Nothing, just fractured seats in the back, their cushions ripped like wounds. "Hello?" My voice cracked, fragile. Silence answered. Waiting, feeling the fine hairs on my arms rise, I whispered my next line. The phantom echo immediately repeated it. The urge to flee was overwhelming, yet I compelled myself to continue, praying the phenomenon would cease. After an hour that stretched into an eternity, I locked the heavy door behind me, relief washing over me in a cold wave. The following day, I recounted the whispers to Elias. He chuckled, dismissing it as wind whistling through the broken panes, or perhaps my own overwrought nerves. He remained adamant. I must return. We had no alternative venue, and my preparation was paramount. So, as dusk bled into night, I found myself once more before the theater's shadowed entrance, the inadequate streetlights barely penetrating the gloom. Inside, the air felt colder, a palpable chill that seeped into my bones. A tremor started in my hands. "Just an old building," I chanted internally, a mantra against mounting fear. I began my warm-ups on stage, pacing, stretching, testing lines. Mere minutes passed before a deafening slam reverberated from backstage, jarring me violently. My heart leapt, thudding painfully against my ribs. I went to investigate. The backstage area was a chaotic landscape of scattered props, fractured furniture, and defunct lighting equipment slumped against a wall. A door marked the entrance to the dressing rooms. It stood closed. Pushing it yielded a protesting groan as it swung inward, revealing a dim corridor. A single, weak bulb flickered overhead, its light struggling against the encroaching shadows. "Is anyone there?" My voice quavered slightly. No response. I ventured down the corridor, the crunch of broken glass underfoot punctuating the silence. Dressing rooms flanked either side. Peeking into one revealed cracked mirrors, reflecting distorted fragments of the room. A skeletal coat rack, a bench missing slats. Spent makeup containers littered the floor like colorful debris. Old wigs perched on mannequin heads, their synthetic hair matted and gray with dust. The pervasive scent of mustiness, of things long untouched, hung heavy in the air. At the corridor's terminus lay a door, stenciled basement. It was locked fast. I jiggled the handle futilely. Another slam echoed, this one clearly originating from the stage area. My pulse hammered in my throat as I hurried back. Returning to the stage, I found everything seemingly undisturbed, except for one critical detail. The spotlight was extinguished. I hadn't touched the switch. The auditorium plunged into near-total blackness, forcing me to fumble for my phone's flashlight. Locating the circuit box near the stage, I flipped the spotlight switch. It flickered back to life. My gaze swept across the rows of seats, and an unshakable certainty washed over me. They were not empty. Though I saw no one, the weight of countless eyes pressed upon me. My scalp prickled. Breath came short and shallow. Deciding I'd endured enough for one night, I departed swiftly. The next day, I arrived earlier, hoping daylight might dilute the oppressive atmosphere. The theater remained dim, shadows clinging stubbornly to corners, but at least the shapes around me were discernible. I set up a small auxiliary lamp on stage. As I began to rehearse, the uncanny whispering resumed, this time seeming to originate from the wings, just beyond my peripheral vision. Again my lines were echoed, anticipated. My voice faltered, sweat beaded on my forehead. Stepping off stage, I pushed aside a heavy, dust-laden curtain, revealing a narrow passage lined with forgotten props. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light, penetrating from unseen cracks. I searched futilely for speakers, any hidden device. Nothing. A sudden scuttling sound from behind a stack of crates tightened my chest. Approaching cautiously, I startled a rat, which squeaked and vanished into the debris. A sigh of relief escaped me, only to be instantly choked off by the sharp report of another slamming door. That evening, summoning a fragile courage, I tried the basement door again. Inexplicably, it was now unlocked. Hesitantly, I descended the narrow staircase. The temperature plummeted with each step. the air growing thick with the smell of damp concrete. At the bottom, my phone's flashlight beam sliced through the darkness, revealing a vast, low-ceilinged space with rough stone walls. Racks crammed with costumes stood sentinel, their fabrics ravaged by time, bearing tears and indeterminate stains. Old-fashioned dresses, suits, jackets, they looked as if torn apart in a frenzy. Masks hung from hooks, each face contorted into a rictus of agony or terror, their eyes hollow voids. Gooseflesh erupted on my arms. My stomach churned. I reached out, touching one mask. The material felt strangely clammy, saturated with the cellar's dampness. A low, persistent humming emanated from the far side of the basement. Picking my way over splintered wooden crates, my foot struck something metallic, an old, overturned lamp. I continued towards the sound, reaching a corner piled high with more costumes. A broken dressing screen leaned precariously beside a dust-filmed mirror propped against the wall. My reflection stared back, pale, tense, my breath held captive in my chest. I forced an inhale. As I exhaled, a voice whispered my name, intimately close, directly behind me. I whirled, flashlight beam cutting wildly through the empty air. Nothing. My heart hammered. Adrenaline surged. Primal instinct screamed. "Get out!" I turned and fled upstairs, the basement door left gaping behind me. Emerging onto the main floor, I found my auxiliary lamp on stage violently overturned, its bulb shattered. A curse escaped my lips. The auditorium was steeped in shadow, save for the faint light filtering through high, grimy windows. I heard my own voice echo slightly. No, not an echo. The whisper, again, reciting the lines I'd just rehearsed moments before in the basement. My hands trembled so violently, I dropped my script. Scooping it up, I started towards the exit, my footsteps loud, hurried. Halfway down the aisle, a tangible coldness rushed past me, like an icy draft where no breeze could be. I spun, catching a fleeting glimpse of a black shape darting behind a distant row of seats. My skin turned frigid, my lungs constricted. I didn't slow my pace, bursting outside into the relative normalcy of the street. Relief crashed over me. I leaned against the rough brick wall, gasping for breath, pulse frantic, shirt clinging damply to my back. I knew I should bring someone, anyone next time, but Elias's instructions were clear. Rehearse alone, and deeper still, a conviction formed. I had to confront this. So, the following day, I returned, armed with a renewed resolve to anchor my focus solely on the script, to erect mental barricades against the theater's intrusions. I went directly to the stage, positioning myself near the footlights, keeping the shadowy expanse of seats within my direct line of sight. I began my lines. My voice, initially tremulous, gained strength. I consciously ignored peripheral flickers, dismissed faint creaks and groans, yet the pressure remained, the palpable weight of an unseen audience, judging, waiting. During a pause for breath, a faint chanting arose, seemingly from the very air around me. Multiple voices, indistinct, overlapping, weaving a nonsensical tapestry of sound. My scalp tingled. A wave of dizziness washed over me. I pushed onward, my hands shaking, forcing my voice louder to compete with the distorted chorus. The chanting swelled, reminiscent of a gathering crowd, yet discordant, arrhythmic. The voices ebbed and flowed unpredictably. Pressing my hands momentarily to my ears, I shouted, "Stop!" The sound abruptly ceased. I stood in the ringing silence, gasping. Perhaps it was a prank. I decided to investigate the main corridors, through the wings, out into the desolate lobby. Empty. The overhead fixtures buzzed erratically. Broken glass crunched underfoot. Heart pounding, skin clammy, I walked the lobby's perimeter, testing doors, all locked or obstructed by debris. It was then I heard them, footsteps on the stage behind me. Slow, measured, deliberate. My throat constricted. Returning cautiously, phone beam sweeping the stage, I found it empty. Yet the footsteps persisted for a few more seconds, circling behind the heavy curtains before finally fading. I forced myself back to the script. At that moment, the heavy double doors at the rear of the auditorium slammed shut with violent finality. The boom echoed through the vast space, making me jump so hard my knees nearly buckled. My lines scattered from my mind. I simply stood there, trembling. Seconds ticked by. I struggled to regain composure, my breathing shallow, sweat tracing a path down my temple. The chanting recommenced, softer now, insidious. A pressure built in my chest, as if the theater itself were physically compelling me to perform. I launched into my lines again, louder this time, infusing them with desperate conviction. My voice cracked, faltered, but I pressed on. The chanting intensified, mirroring my energy. A bizarre current suffused the air, like static electricity raising the fine hairs on my arms. I didn't stop, couldn't stop, until I reached the scene's conclusion. Upon the final word, the chanting cut off instantly. The ensuing silence was deafening, absolute. My ears rang. I realized I was drenched in sweat. Fists clenched, chest heaving, I stood catching my breath. A full minute passed. Then, a faint scraping sound from behind me. I spun around. One of the heavy stage curtains was slowly, deliberately, drawing aside, as if someone concealed themselves behind it. My gut screamed, "Run!" But instead, I stepped forward. Grasping the curtain's edge, I yanked it open. Nothing. Only the dusty backstage void and a broken ladder leaning against the far wall. I let the heavy fabric fall back, feeling utterly drained, profoundly unsettled. Night after night, I returned. I rehearsed, and each time, the tension mounted. The footsteps, the sibilant whispers, the slamming doors, the unnerving chants, they became constants. But I perceived a pattern. The phenomena intensified in direct proportion to the energy and emotion I invested in my performance. It felt chillingly as though the theater craved the drama, demanding I animate the play for its spectral, unseen patrons. My legs often trembled uncontrollably. A persistent headache throbbed behind my eyes from the unrelenting stress, but I refused to yield. On my final night alone before the full cast rehearsals commenced, I felt compelled to check the basement one last time. Down the groaning stairs I went, phone beam cutting the oppressive dark. The costumes hung like decaying specters. The masks maintained their silent, agonized vigil. The familiar cold pressure saturated the air, and faintly, from above, the chanting echoed down, reverberating through the stone. I lifted one of the masks, examining its tortured expression more closely. Fine cracks webbed its surface. It felt unnaturally heavy, and I noticed something new. Fresh, deep scratches along the edges of the surrounding masks, as if something had clawed at them in fury. My heart pounded against my ribs. A sudden thud sounded behind me. I turned sharply. A headless mannequin lay toppled on the floor, its torso chipped and scarred. I flinched, nearly dropping the mask. Replacing it carefully, I scrambled back upstairs. Back in the main auditorium, the chanting reached a fever pitch, the sound waves seeming to physically buffet the walls. My pulse throbbed in my throat. Stepping onto the stage, I found the single spotlight already blazing, though I hadn't activated it. The chanting swelled, cresting like a wave. Fueled by a mixture of terror and defiance, I delivered my lines with every ounce of strength I possessed, pouring my fear, my exhaustion, my resolve into the words. My arms felt numb. I nearly stumbled over a loose floorboard but caught myself, never breaking character, never stopping. As I uttered the final words of my scene, the chanting sliced off mid-sound. The abrupt silence crashed down, immense and heavy. My ears rang violently. I stood, sweat stinging my eyes, gasping for air. Taking a hesitant step back, I looked out into the cavernous darkness of the seats, still empty, yet the presence I felt was stronger than ever, almost suffocating in its intensity. I walked off the stage, snatched my bag, and exited the theater, this time without a backward glance. Outside, the cool night air felt like a balm. My hands shook uncontrollably. A strange numbness tingled in my cheeks. Locking the heavy door felt like sealing a tomb. A fragile sense of relief settled over me, thin and easily broken. Group rehearsals would begin soon, yet I cannot dislodge the conviction that the theater waits, specifically for me. My muscles tense reflexively even now, merely recalling it. What resides within those decaying walls, I cannot say, but I know with chilling certainty that it demands a performance. And whenever I remember those whispers mirroring my lines, that familiar tightness coils in my gut once more. It's as if the place itself is starved for a spectacle, and I was its sole sustenance. Even recounting this, my chest feels heavy. I can almost hear the low thrum of that chanting in the recesses of my mind, and I swear, if I close my eyes, I see the hollow sockets of those basement masks staring back. Above, directly overhead, a dry scrape, scrape, scrape echoed into the bedroom's profound stillness. Initially, Alara dismissed it, the groans of timbers settling, perhaps, or some nocturnal creature scrabbling across the shingles. But lying rigid in the encompassing dark, her gaze fixed unseeingly on the ceiling, she apprehended its cadence, too rhythmic, too methodical. This wasn't the house breathing, it was intent. For weeks, faint percussions and creaks had whispered from the attic, sounds she'd filed away as the usual complaints of venerable architecture. Tonight, however, offered no such comforting explanation. Tonight, the noise bore the unmistakable signature of presence. Her pulse hammered against her ribs. With infinite care, Alara eased herself upright, the mattress barely sighing beneath her weight. The scratching persisted, a relentless, grating metronome. Her hand, quivering slightly, fumbled across the nightstand for her phone. Fingers found the cool glass, stabbed uncertainly at the emergency number. The instant she initiated the call, the scratching ceased. Utterly. Alara held her breath, the phone a cold pressure against her ear, awaiting the dispatcher's voice. Silence descended, thick and absolute. Then, simultaneous with the operator's query, a resonant thump reverberated from above, trailed by the swift, heavy tread of footsteps. 911, report your emergency. Someone's in my attic, Alara breathed into the receiver, a frantic whisper. Send someone, quickly." She recited her address, the syllables trembling, then ended the call, her whole frame seized by a violent tremor. Overhead, the footfalls had paused, replaced by faint, indeterminate rustlings. Whoever inhabited the space above remained, moving with stealth. She slid from the bed, bare feet meeting the frigid kiss of the hardwood floor without a sound. Escape beckoned, yet the route downstairs lay directly beneath the square outline of the attic access hatch. To flee was to potentially walk straight into the path of the unknown occupant. Turning instead, she ghosted towards the closet, retrieving the wooden baseball bat kept within, a talisman against imagined threats now terrifyingly real. Sweat slicked her palms as she clenched the worn grip, her eyes riveted to the plaster expanse overhead. Time dilated, stretching into an agonizing crawl. Where were the sirens? She strained, listening past the ragged tempo of her own breathing, hoping for the distant wail, but heard only the house's intermittent sighs, and, chillingly, those infrequent scuffles from the attic. Then, a new sound sent ice sluicing through her veins. It originated from the hallway just beyond her door, the faint, gritty slide of the attic hatch being shifted, a knot cinched tight in her throat. They were descending. Elara flattened herself against the wall beside the bedroom doorframe, bat held high, poised. Her heart thudded with the force she felt sure must betray her presence. Floorboards in the corridor groaned under deliberate, measured weight. A pause directly outside her room. She held her breath, every sinew taut. Slowly, agonizingly, the doorknob began to rotate. The door edged inward. Through the gloom, pierced by moonlight, a shadow stretched long across the floorboards as a silhouette filled the opening. With a choked cry, Elara swung the bat, pouring every ounce of terror-fueled strength into the arc. A sickening impact, a sharp gasp of pain. The figure staggered back, and in that instant, Elara bolted. She surged past them, a blur of motion down the staircase, fumbling with the front door lock, then bursting into the cool embrace of the night. She sprinted across the lawn to her neighbor's house, hammering on the door until the porch light blazed to life. As the door swung open, the blessed, rising crescendo of police sirens finally reached her ears. The following hour dissolved into a confusing haze of flashing lights, uniformed figures, and murmured questions. A meticulous search of her home yielded nothing. No intruder, no forced entry. They promised increased patrols, gently suggested she find lodging elsewhere for a few nights. Yet a persistent unease lingered. The intruders' movements, their apparent familiarity with the house's layout. It felt rehearsed, intimate. Against all rational advice, Elara chose to remain. An inexplicable compulsion demanded she understand the violation of her sanctuary. The next day saw a locksmith diligently replacing every lock, followed by the installation of a comprehensive security system, its electronic eyes vigilantly guarding each portal. Even fortified, relaxation proved elusive. Every creak became a footstep, every shadow a lurking presence. The attic hatch became a focal point of obsessive checks. A week drifted by, marked only by Elara's escalating disquiet. The conviction of being watched intensified, even in solitude. Minor anomalies began to surface. A book infinitesimally shifted on its shelf. a mug appearing in the sink she couldn't recall using. Paranoia, she reasoned, yet the feeling persisted. She began methodical inspections, tracing walls, scrutinizing floorboards, seeking the invisible breach. It was during one such obsessive search, within the seldom-used guest room, that her fingers, trailing along the baseboard, detected a subtle give in the wall panel. Her heart leapt. Pressing firmly, a small section pivoted inward, revealing a constricted passage shrouded in darkness and smelling of dust and stale air. Her flashlight beam sliced into the void, illuminating crude wooden rungs ascending towards the attic. A tremor shook her hands as the horrifying truth dawned. A clandestine entrance had existed all along. Prudence screamed for the police, but a potent cocktail of curiosity and the desperate need for answers overrode caution. Taking a shuddering breath, she began the ascent. The attic sprawled larger than anticipated, a cavernous expanse beneath the roofline. Her light carved through the gloom, glancing off stacked cartons and shrouded furniture. Deeper within, however, beyond a barricade of old steamer trunks, lay a sight that turned her stomach to ice. A rudimentary living space occupied the far corner. A sleeping bag lay flattened on the dusty floorboards, encircled by the detritus of occupancy. Empty food packaging, plastic water bottles. An overturned crate served as a nightstand, supporting a small battery-operated lamp and a cluster of worn paperbacks. But it was the wall behind this makeshift encampment that arrested her breath. It was plastered with photographs, dozens. As she drew nearer, recognition struck like a physical blow. They were all pictures of her. Ilara walking to her car, Ilara tending the garden, Ilara reading in her living room. Some were clearly captured from outside through windows, but others possessed an intimacy that could only have originated from within the house itself. The implication slammed into her with visceral force. Someone had been dwelling here, in secret, observing her, for months. She stumbled back, mind reeling, the flashlight beam dancing erratically. Get out. Call the police. Now. But as she pivoted, the light snagged on something else. A small, low door set into the attic's knee wall. It stood slightly ajar, emitting a sliver of faint luminescence from beyond. Every nerve shrieked retreat, yet an inexorable pull drew her forward. She had to know. She had to see. She nudged the small door open, wincing at the protesting squeal of its hinges. The space within was cramped, closet-sized, but its contents sent a fresh wave of cold dread through her. The walls were covered in frantic script, scrawled messages, disjointed paragraphs bordering on incoherence. At the room's center rested a small table bearing a laptop, its screen casting a soft, eerie glow. Drawn closer, her eyes fell upon the open document displayed there. Reading the words, the world seemed to tilt, threatening to capsize. Day 156, nearly discovered today. My carelessness. Too much noise. It's all right. She isn't ready. But soon. Soon she will grasp the reason for my presence. My vigil. She is the one. The only one capable of helping me. Helping us. She simply doesn't realize it yet. The text blurred through sudden tears. This person, this phantom occupant, had inhabited her home, chronicling her existence for over 5 months, believing her some sort of designated savior? For what purpose? A sound spun her around, heart leaping into her throat. Blocking the cramped room's entrance stood a figure. Dim light revealed tangled, neglected hair, framing eyes that shone with a disturbing, fervent intensity. "You weren't meant to find this," the stranger rasped, their voice rough from disuse. "But perhaps it is time. Perhaps you are finally prepared to understand." Ilara retreated, her back colliding with the table. "Who are you? What is it you want?" The stranger advanced, an odor of unwashed body and stale sustenance preceding them. "I am here for your salvation, for all our salvations. You are the linchpin, can't you perceive it? Your research, the work you do, it holds the answer we desperately seek." Her mind floundered. Her research? She crunched data for a modest tech firm. How could that possibly be pivotal? Confusion, fear. "I comprehend," the stranger murmured, closing the distance another step. "But clarity will come. Soon you will fathom the necessity of this. Why I had to observe you, absorb every facet of your life." Desperately, Ilara scanned the confined space for an escape, but the stranger filled the only egress. Trapped. "Please," she managed, striving for a steady tone. "I don't understand any of this. Just tell me what you want." The stranger's expression softened into an unsettling approximation of a smile. "What I desire, your fulfillment of destiny, for you to apply your unique skills to decipher the message, the communication that will redeem us all." As they spoke, her gaze snagged on a small remote control lying beside the laptop. Acting on pure instinct, she snatched it, aiming it defensively. "Stay back!" she cried, hoping the sudden action might startle them. To her astonishment, wide-eyed terror flared in the stranger's eyes. "No!" they shrieked. "Don't activate that! You'll destroy everything!" In her bewildered state, her finger inadvertently depressed a button. Instantly, a piercing electronic wail erupted, flooding the confined space. Her new security system's siren. The stranger let out a howl of pure frustration and lunged. Ilara ducked beneath their grasping arm and scrambled away. She clawed her way through the attic clutter, down the hidden ladder, bursting into the relative safety of the hallway. Behind her, she heard the sounds of pursuit, of crashing objects, but dared not look back. She fled the house, spilling into the street as the alarm continued its relentless shriek, now harmonizing with the rapidly approaching whine of police sirens. She stood there, trembling violently, gulping air. Her unassuming existence lay fractured, her sanctuary irrevocably profaned, and she was left grappling with a chilling certainty. Sometimes the true horrors aren't lurking beneath the bed or concealed in closets. Sometimes they reside just overhead, silent watchers, patiently waiting. The laboratory, deep in the building's heart, hummed its vacant tune near 2 a.m, bathed in the spectral luminescence of dormant equipment and active monitors. My presence should have been the sole anomaly in this sterile quiet, yet the sudden alien rhythm of footfalls drumming down the corridor announced the unwelcome end to my solitary night of inquiry. Weeks had bled into one another under these lights, my existence pared down to data streams, and algorithmic trials for the thesis that consumed me. This space, with its low electronic thrum and the ghost of chemical reagents, had become a peculiar haven. Tonight, however, that sanctuary fractured the instant the approaching steps confirmed I was not alone. Louder they grew, each impact deliberate, resonant. I held my breath, a statue carved from apprehension, gaze locked on the entryway. The door sighed open, revealing a shape both familiar and jarringly out of place. Dr. Alistair Finch, a colleague of my own Professor Sharma. "Ah, Ilara," he intoned, his voice a strange confection of forced brightness against the late hour's velvet backdrop. "I suspected I might find you burning the proverbial oil." A smile, thin and brittle, stretched across my lips, a poor mask for the disquiet churning within. "Dr. Finch, I didn't realize anyone else would be working this deep into the night." He glided into the lab, pulling the door closed behind him. The soft snick of the latch echoed with an unsettling finality. "Oh, the muse is nocturnal, wouldn't you agree?" he offered, a vague gesture sketching dismissal in the air. "Inspiration rarely consults the clock." I nodded mutely, turning back toward the glowing constellation of data on my screen, hoping the gesture signaled dismissal. Instead, I felt his presence draw nearer, a shadow falling over my shoulder as he leaned in, scrutinizing the complex patterns displayed. "Such intricate patterns," he murmured, his breath disturbingly warm against my neck. "Refresh my memory, Ilara, the precise vector of this fascinating inquiry." A subtle shift in my chair created a necessary distance. "It's a novel framework for data encryption," I stated, striving for vocal neutrality, leveraging quantum entanglement principles to forge theoretically impervious codes. His eyes, magnified behind his spectacles, ignited with a sudden, sharp intensity that sent a chill tracing down my spine. "Impervious codes? Truly, that is exceptionally compelling." An internal alarm, silent but insistent, began to chime. Dr. Finch, in all prior encounters, had been a figure of polite detachment. This abrupt, almost fervent interest felt dissonant, bordering on invasive. "It's nascent," I countered, minimizing the active window, shrinking the data from view. "Considerable refinement is needed before any practical implementation." He produced a low chuckle, a sound that vibrated unpleasantly, prickling the hairs on my nape. "Undoubtedly, but even nascent discoveries can possess significant leverage in the appropriate circles, naturally." My pulse quickened, a frantic drum against my ribs. The implication hung, thick and venomous in the sterile air. Was he truly suggesting? I rose from my chair, needing the vertical advantage, needing more space. "Well, the hour grows late. I should probably gather my things." Dr. Finch remained rooted, his gaze, usually softened by the lenses, now seeming to pierce right through me. "Before you depart, perhaps allow me a more thorough examination of your datasets. My perspective might offer some valuable synthesis." Hesitation seized me. Every instinct screamed, "Flee!" Yet he stood cloaked in the authority of his position, a known associate of my advisor. A blunt refusal felt perilous, potentially jeopardizing years of work. "I appreciate the gesture, Dr. Finch," I replied, choosing each word with surgical care. "But given the proprietary nature at this stage, sharing raw data seems premature. Research integrity protocols, you understand." For a fleeting instant, the veneer of affability cracked, revealing a harder, more calculating substance beneath. "Come now, Ilara. We are academics, are we not? Is the open exchange of knowledge not the very bedrock of our pursuit?" I took an involuntary step back, my hip bumping against the cool, unforgiving edge of the lab bench. "Of course, but this constitutes the core of my doctoral work. I'm not prepared to disseminate primary data prior to formal review and publication." Dr. Finch's smile returned, but it failed to warm his eyes. "I grasp your caution. However, a promising researcher such as yourself might find certain forms of support advantageous, support extending beyond the purely academic, into the financial realm, perhaps." The proposition solidified, stark and ugly, in the space between us. My mouth felt like parchment. The full dimension of the encounter crashed down. This wasn't mere curiosity or academic overreach. It was an attempted appropriation. "My current support structure is quite adequate, thank you," I managed, my voice steadier than the tremor in my hands. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I really must be leaving." I reached for my bag, but he shifted, a fluid movement that placed him directly between me and the door, an unexpected barrier. "I fear you misapprehend the scope of the opportunity I present, Ilara. Your work possesses revolutionary potential, but brilliance languishes without the proper conduits. I possess those conduits. I can ensure your research achieves the prominence it warrants." My thoughts raced, a frantic search for an exit strategy. The emergency door beckoned, but its use would trigger alarms throughout the building. My phone lay dormant in my bag on the far side of Dr. Finch. "Your confidence is noted," I said, battling to maintain a facade of calm. "But I assure you, Professor Sharma and I have a clear trajectory." His features hardened, the mask dissolving completely. "Your advisor fails to grasp the true magnitude, the market potential. Others do, however, others who would compensate generously for even a preliminary glimpse." The pretense evaporated. He was admitting it outright, his intent to broker my intellectual property. A surge of indignation burned through the cold fear. "That will not occur," I stated, the words sharp and final. "Now please, allow me to pass." He advanced another step, his proximity oppressive, looming. "I'm afraid that isn't feasible, not until we reach a more mutually beneficial understanding." My heart hammered against my ribs, trapped, the predator before me, the unyielding bench behind. Then, as my hand brushed the cool glass surface beside me, inspiration sparked, desperate, instinctual. In a single, fluid motion, I seized a beaker filled with distilled water and flung its contents directly into his face. He recoiled with a strangled gasp, sputtering, hands flying up to clear his vision. That fractured second was all I needed. I darted around his momentarily incapacitated form, snatched my bag mid-stride, and bolted for the door. "You will regret this!" His enraged voice echoed down the corridor, but I was already gone, feet pounding the linoleum, the sound swallowed by the building's cavernous silence. I didn't dare slow until I reached the sanctuary of my car, keys rattling in my trembling hands. As I pulled away, the rearview mirror framed him emerging from the building, his face a mask of impotent fury under the sickly yellow sodium lights. The ensuing days were a disorienting blend of hypervigilance and gnawing fear. The lab remained untouched. I worked remotely, starting at every unexpected noise, the memory of Finch's predatory gaze a constant shadow, the imperative to act warred with a paralyzing dread, the fear of disbelief, of academic ruin. Yet, as the initial shock subsided, anger began to displace the fear, solidifying into resolve. This was my creation, forged through sleepless nights and relentless effort. I would not allow it to be stolen, nor would I be cowed into silence. I requested a meeting with Professor Sharma. Seated in her familiar office, palms slick with sweat, heart pounding a frantic rhythm, I recounted the events of that night, the words tumbling out, raw and urgent. To my profound relief, she absorbed my account not with doubt, but with immediate, fierce belief. Her customary composure fractured, replaced by a palpable wave of protective indignation. "This is utterly unconscionable," she declared, her voice tight with controlled fury. "Alistair has crossed an unforgivable line. We are taking this directly to the Dean." What followed unfolded with dizzying speed. A series of formal meetings, painstaking investigations, tense confrontations. Dr. Finch initially issued vehement denials, but the unblinking eye of the lab's security camera footage proved irrefutable. Cornered, he confessed. It surfaced that my experience was not unique. Other students, other researchers, stepped forward, their narratives echoing my own, tales of insidious pressure, of attempted intellectual theft. The revelations sent tremors through the department, culminating in Dr. Finch's swift dismissal and a thorough restructuring of research oversight and security protocols. As for me, I plunged back into my work, propelled by a renewed, almost defiant sense of purpose. The ordeal had undeniably shaken me, yet it had also starkly illuminated the intrinsic value of my pursuit. If it was worth stealing, it was unequivocally worth protecting, worth completing. Months later, standing at the podium, the culmination of my doctoral journey laid bare before the committee, I felt a profound sense of victory that transcended mere academic validation. I had confronted a violation of trust, a threat to my intellectual integrity, and emerged not just intact, but fortified. The ensuing applause was gratifying, certainly, but the truest triumph resided in the quiet, unshakable knowledge that the research presented was wholly mine, earned through diligence and defended with courage. Leaving the auditorium, Professor Sharma intercepted me, her expression radiating pride. "Stellar work, Ilara," she said warmly, "and incidentally, we've already fielded some intriguing, entirely legitimate inquiries regarding potential applications of your encryption methodology." A genuine smile touched my lips, a blend of nascent excitement and hard-won vindication. "That's wonderful news. I'm eager to explore where this path leads." As we stepped out together into the embrace of the bright, unfiltered sunlight, a sense of buoyant optimism settled over me. The journey ahead promised its own set of complexities, its own unforeseen obstacles, but the encounter with Dr. Finch had imparted a crucial, indelible lesson. In the vanguard of discovery, knowledge is indeed power, and the act of safeguarding that knowledge can be as vital, as demanding, as the act of creation itself. The moment burns itself behind my eyes, even now. A late hour, the city breathing softly outside my window, the only illumination the stark glow of my monitor. I was sifting through the day's harvest of images, digital ghosts of stone and light, when my cursor hesitated. There, nestled in the deep shadows of crumbling masonry, a smudge of white, an anomaly. Magnified, it resolved into the faint outline of a woman, draped in something pale and lingering at the frame's edge. An overlooked tourist, perhaps, straying into the shot. My initial dismissal soured as I studied her stance. She wasn't observing the architecture. She was turned towards the lens, towards me. A peculiar pressure bloomed low in my gut, the instinctive tightening when unseen eyes fix upon you in a throng. My name is Elias Thorne. I chase echoes through time, a freelance eye paid to capture the souls of ancient structures. My path winds through forgotten towns, vaulted cathedrals, hollowed-out convents, anywhere history whispers from weathered stone. Fear isn't usually a companion on these journeys. Solitude in decaying places, the scuff of my boots in vast, empty halls, the groan of old gates, these are familiar cadences. Yet that night, tracing the indistinct lines of her form, trying to wrest a face from the pixels, a cold certainty settled within me. I felt her gaze pierce the screen, an impossible connection. Shaking it off, a tremor in my hand, I clicked forward. Minutes melted. Another image, same location, different perspective. And there she was again. A sliver this time on the far left. The curve of a shoulder, a cascade of dark hair, swathed in the same pallid fabric. Impossible. The shots were mere seconds apart. My memory held no record of such a presence. Sunlight, sharp and clarifying, was what I sought the next day. I returned to the old convent, its high walls enclosing a courtyard worn smooth by time. Noon baked the stones. Silence pressed in, thick and watchful. I erected my tripod, framing the elegant decay of the arches lining one flank. Dust motes danced in the occasional breeze, the only movement in the profound stillness. Yet a tightness persisted in my chest, a low hum of anxiety without discernible cause. I pushed through, focused on aperture and angle, ignoring the prickle on my skin. Later, back in the sterile quiet of my apartment, I processed the new captures. Relief washed over me initially, nothing amiss. Then, near the sequence's end, she reappeared. I leaned in, breath catching. She stood partially obscured by a pillar, undeniably present, clad in that same white dress. Closer now, measurably closer than before. A cold sweat broke on my palms, my pulse a frantic drum against my ribs. Coincidence strained credulity. A local woman? A curious groundskeeper? But my lens, my awareness, had registered nothing, no one. My profession demands attention to the frame, to every element within it. I remembered no one. Sleep offered little refuge that night. My thoughts snagged on those digital apparitions. Morning found me hunched over my workstation, resolved to dissect every recent shoot, frame by meticulous frame. Perhaps a lens flare, a trick of light, some rational explanation waited to be unearthed. Instead, I found 6 instances, 6 photographs spanning different days and locations, all featuring the woman in white. Her position shifted in each, sometimes veiled by shadow, sometimes starker against the backdrop. But the trajectory was undeniable. She was advancing, details sharpened under scrutiny. The dress, antique in cut, flowing loose. Her hair, a dark, indeterminate mass. Her face remained stubbornly elusive, a blur of pixels. The following days were a blur of contracted work, assignments pulling me to nearby villages, the hushed reverence of an aged library, the jewel-toned light filtering through a small church's stained glass. A nervous energy thrummed beneath my skin. I found myself constantly scanning peripheries, checking doorways, anticipating her manifestation in the physical world. My focus fractured, my mind perpetually bracing. Yet, in real time, nothing. No furtive follower, no pale figure melting into crowds. Only later, bathed in the monitor's cold light, would she materialize. Always in white, always lodged somewhere within the frame, and always, incrementally, nearer, behind a row of solemn pews, pressed against a damp stone wall. Once, chillingly, poised midway up a narrow, shadowed staircase, her gaze seemingly fixed downwards, towards where I had stood. A phantom coldness traced my spine. I could almost imagine the whisper of her breath. My apartment door acquired new locks, rituals of checking and rechecking. The peephole became a necessary pause before venturing out. Hallways felt longer, the silence behind me pregnant with possibility. Talking about it felt impossible. Who would believe this spectral pursuit documented only in JPEGs? The sheer illogic was a wall. The same woman, the same dress, appearing across disparate locations, unseen by human eyes, until captured by my lens. Then came the fortress, perched on the city's edge, ringed by a thirsty moat and formidable stone ramparts. I arrived late afternoon, chasing the slanted golden light ideal for revealing texture and age. I forced concentration, framing the imposing gate, the weathered outer walls, the sprawling courtyard where a few distant tourists drifted like colorful leaves. A sudden, potent wave of unease washed over me. My shoulders seized. A faint noise. The skitter of gravel on stone. I spun, heart leaping, finding only empty air and lengthening shadows. An unsteady breath escaped me. I returned to my work, but the feeling lingered. Hours later, packing my gear, my hands felt numb on the steering wheel, my legs strangely heavy, braced for an impact that never came. Back in my sanctuary, the key scraped in the lock. The bolt slid home with excessive force. I dropped my bag, sank into my desk chair, the ritual both dreaded and necessary. See the photos. Know if she was there. The import process crawled. 30 images, clean. A fragile tendril of hope unfurled. 31. There. My stomach plummeted. She stood half swallowed by a deep doorway in the ancient wall, clearer than before despite the obscurity. Subsequent shots tracked her across the courtyard, lurking behind a wide sunlit arch. The final frame of the sequence stopped my breath. She occupied the center ground, still yards away, yet starkly, undeniably closer. Something clenched hard around my ribs. My breathing grew ragged, fingers trembling on the mouse. The thought surfaced, sharp and unwelcome. Quit. Change careers. But photography wasn't just a job. It was the language I spoke, the only one I knew. This had to be a complex illusion, a bizarre, elaborate prank. But how? Across so many locations? The logistics defied reason. Retreat followed. Days bled into one another within the confines of my apartment. The internet offered no solace, no whispers of a white-clad wanderer haunting historical sites. Vague inquiries on local forums yielded nothing but digital silence. I paced the length of my living room, a caged animal gnawing at the bars of the inexplicable. Finally, necessity gnawed harder. A local historical society called, offering a commission, the interior of an old bell tower downtown. The fee was needed, and a desperate, perhaps foolish idea took root. Perhaps here, in this confined space, I could finally see her, confront this photographic phantom. 90 feet of narrow, spiraling stone stairs awaited. The air inside hung thick and cool, scented with damp rock and the tang of old iron. My footfalls cannonaded in the enclosed space. Pigeons rustled unseen in the heights. Near the base, aiming up the vertiginous coil towards the bell, I set up my camera. The flash fired, its brief glare momentarily blinding, the shutter's click echoing sharply, breath loud in my ears. I ascended, pausing on landings to capture the texture of the aged walls, the scent of dust and decay catching in my throat. Between the second and third landings, a sudden, inexplicable draft of cold air washed over me. I froze, every sense straining in the sudden chill. My skin prickled. Silence roared, then fractured. A faint footstep from above. A soft, distinct tap on stone. My heart hammered against my ribs. Flashlight beam stabbing upwards, slicing through the gloom. Nothing. Yet a peripheral flicker, a suggestion of white vanishing around the curve ahead. Adrenaline surged, turning my legs to water. Retreat screamed, but I forced myself upward, step by deliberate, heavy step. Muscles bunched, breath tearing in shallow gasps. The higher I climbed, the deeper the shadows grew, punctuated by slivers of light from narrow apertures. My flashlight trembled. Reaching the summit, the massive, rust-pocked bell loomed overhead. The floor, rough-hewn stone, nowhere to hide, save behind stout wooden beams or piles of debris. I swept the beam across every corner. Cobwebs draped like macabre lace, dead leaves skittered, nothing else. The silence was absolute, profound. Sweat slicked my back. Minutes passed, marked only by the frantic thudding in my chest. Then, the descent, legs unsteady, taking obligatory wide shots on each landing, rushing now, desperate for the open air. Home again. The ritual resumed, mouth dry, shirt clinging unpleasantly, clicking through the bell tower sequence, image after image. Then, I saw it. A frame captured near the top. Her face, peering from behind a thick wooden beam, directly into the lens. She was close, frighteningly close, perhaps only feet from where I'd stood, unknowingly exposed. Her eyes, dark pools in the stark pale oval of her face, rendered sharp by the flash. A strangled gasp escaped me. My heart felt like it slammed against my sternum. I had been there. I had looked. There had been no one. Yet the image stared back, irrefutable. My body locked, rigid with a terror that went beyond fear. That night was a siege. Food held no appeal. Water, pacing, the endless loop of memory. Every nerve felt frayed, exposed. Mirrors became treacherous, reflecting potential horrors over my shoulder. The television droned, a futile bulwark against the silence. Eventually, Exhaustion claimed me on the couch, dragging me into fragmented sleep, haunted by the soft tap of footsteps on stone stairs. Morning brought only a deeper weariness. I needed distance, a break from the lens, from seeking out shadowed corners. Editing beckoned. Client work, thankfully devoid of ancient ruins. I brewed coffee, settled at the computer, tried to immerse myself in retouching skin tones and sharpening landscapes. But the habit was ingrained. With every opened file, my eyes darted instinctively to the backgrounds, hunting for a whisper of white. My pulse would spike, breath hitching. The expectation was constant, and the terrifying calculus began, closer in every sequence. If I continued, if I kept raising my camera, she would eventually fill the frame. The thought brought a fresh wave of cold sweat. What then? What happens when the distance closes entirely? Did she seek something? Would she remain a silent watcher, even inches away? Or was this a prelude, a warning? Mid-afternoon, the doorbell shrieked. I jolted violently, coffee sloshing, heart hammering. I crept to the door, peered through the distorting lens of the peephole. Just a courier. I cracked the door, accepted the package with a mumbled word, slammed the bolts home. My hands trembled. Even this mundane interaction felt like a violation. My nerves stripped bare. That evening, compelled by a morbid curiosity, I arranged them all, the images containing her, chronologically across my screen. From a barely discernible speck in the distance of the first convent shot, she advanced relentlessly. Frame by frame, the space between her and the lens shrank, sometimes oblique, half-hidden, but always progressing. Her face, a cipher until the bell tower. Now I stared into those eyes again. Not angry, not sorrowful, just intent, focused, as if she were studying me. My throat constricted. Destroy the drive? Delete the evidence? But my livelihood resided there too, tangled with this digital haunting. Instead, I copied everything. The spectral sequence, the client work, my entire visual history, onto external drives, burying them deep within a drawer. A desperate act of preservation, perhaps. Proof, should my sanity finally fray completely. The subsequent days were an exercise in forced normalcy. Groceries were bought, emails answered, edits completed. I even risked short walks, the camera deliberately left behind, a renounced limb. The urge to photograph felt dangerous now. Streets became landscapes of hypervigilance. Every face scanned, every garment assessed. No woman in white materialized from the crowds. Yet the knot of tension in my shoulders remained, a permanent resident. Yesterday the phone rang, a prospective client, a lucrative offer, a restored mansion, sprawling and historic, on the town's periphery, shooting in 2 weeks. I stalled, mumbled about needing time, hung up, sat on the couch, staring at the impassive wall, a dull ache spreading through my chest. The crossroads stretched before me, stark and unavoidable. Keep working, keep feeding the proximity of the watcher, or stop, silence the shutter, and face financial ruin. I don't know who she is. I don't know what she wants. Only that she exists within my frames, a silent stalker drawn ever closer by the click of my camera. She never speaks. She leaves no trace but her image. But she is there, and she is watching. This inexplicable haunting tightens its grip with every photograph. I don't know what awaits when she finally closes the distance, when the lens reflects only her, a breath away, And that unknown, that final, intimate frame, is the most terrifying prospect of all.